In today's easy Necron painting tutorial, I show you how I painted my Necron Immortals, and it's coming right up.
Necrons!
Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. Right, today I'm painting 30 Necron Immortals, 20 with Tesla guns and 10 with Gauss. I've got them here in my Morphic 3D paint holders, which I'm using to put the Immortals in as I paint them. I plan on painting these so they can be in units of 10, or I can split them into units of 5. I've got 20 on normal GW bases, and I've got 10 on the Wargaming exclusive Tomb World bases. I've got links to my review videos of both these bases and the Morphic 3D paint holders in the description below. Okay, so as you can see, I've already primed these miniatures with Chaos Black, and the reason for that is I'm going to dry brush these miniatures, first of all with Iron Breaker. Now, when dry brushed well, the Iron Breaker will not go into the recesses of the miniatures. You'll have that black paint in the recesses, and this is a great way to avoid having to use a wash on the miniatures. Now, when I first started my Necron army way back in 3rd edition, there were no washes. We did have inks, but there weren't any washes. So this is how I did my Necrons, and I've always done them like this ever since, and it works really well. I do have black guns on my miniatures, so with the exception of the rear sections on the Tesla weapons, I actually leave the guns black because that's going to be their final colour. My paint scheme is literally based around the artwork in the 3rd edition codex, with the exception of the monolith, which they painted green. I painted mine silver, but I pretty much copied these pictures when painting my army, and that was no different for the Necron Immortals. My warriors are painted in a mithril silver finish and a shiny finish because I liked the Terminator sort of feel. It was this warrior scheme at the top that I used. But looking at the pictures for the Immortals, and the Immortals are definitely more worn and more rugged. So that's the design that I went for. Now here is my original Immortal. As I said, it's quite sort of worn and rugged. Now, I had no idea about painting when I first started this hobby, and I did an unusual technique to get this effect. But it works well, and I'm going to actually replicate this technique in this video. Okay, so next we're going to dry brush a second layer, but this time we're going to use Runefang Still. Now, doing this dry brush technique means that we're going to have this almost sort of worn metal look anyway with the miniature, but it's not worn enough for the effects that I actually want to achieve. So more on that in the next stage. For now though, just dry brush all over the metal areas that we've already done, including of course the blade on the Gauss blaster gun, and obviously the back section on the Tesla gun. Anything basically that you want silver, do this coat. Okay, so now we're on to the, I suppose you could call it weathering, and it's a pretty simple thing that I did. As I said, I had no idea what I was doing at the time, but it really does work. So basically, I just dry brushed with black over the larger areas that I wanted to be weathered. This was mainly on the shoulder pads. I just put some paint on the dry brush, took most of it off so that I just had a very small amount of black on the dry brush, and then just dry brushed those bigger areas, and it just dulled down those bigger areas. Now, I did actually want the edges of the shoulder pads to be sort of highlighted as such, so after I did the black, I then used the silver once again and just went over the edges of those shoulder pads. And for reference, I used Runefang Still for this. Now, of course, you could use the modern technique and just paint it block silver and then just wash it with black and then do some highlights. But like I said, this is an easy way to do it. This is how I learnt to do it. Before I knew about painting, I taught myself this technique, and I do think it works well. Okay, so on to the green, because of course Necrons and green go together very, very well. You can use any colour you like, of course, but mine are green, and I started with Caliban green. So I painted the Gauss blaster weapon sections, which I call the green rods, because that's where the green rods used to be, with Caliban green. And I painted the Tesla front energy sections in this colour as well. I also painted the Tomb World bases with this colour. I previously have painted them in silver on my death marks, but I thought it'd be pretty cool to have these ones in this green colour, because some of my Necron terrain is in this green colour as well as silver, so it just brings the army colours together. Okay, so next it's Warpstone green, and what I'm doing here is I'm painting the back sections, the generator as I call it, on the Gauss weapons. I just go straight in with this colour, just trying not to get it onto the black, although we will have some touching up to do at the end because we're going to do a little bit more dry brushing. So we're just going to go in and carefully paint the generators. We will have to paint this a couple of times just to build up the colour. Now onto the tester guns, and this time I painted all of the recesses on the guns at the back with this colour, Warpstone Glow. So that's the section at the bottom, the sticky out piece, and the little grooves at the back of the gun. You can paint this anywhere you like on the miniature. Wherever you think there should be green, you can paint it. Now personally, I'm leaving the wires of both of these units silver. I'm not painting them green, but of course if you want to add more colour you can do so. If I paint more models in the future, I might paint the wires green to differentiate the units so I can see which unit is which, but for these units I'm just leaving them silver. Now I'm going to use this colour to paint the orbs on the base. I'm also going to dry brush all over the base as well with this colour. My idea to turn this unit with these bases from a unit of 10 to a unit of 5 is I'm going to do glow effects on 5 of the bases and not on the other 5. So any orbs that I have on 5 of the bases, I'm going to effectively dry brush around the orb to make it glow, but not on the other 5. I'll be dry brushing with Warpstone green first, and then I'll dry brush over the top with Mute green. Okay, so talking of Mute green, next I dry brushed the generators section on the back of the Gauss blasters. Just a light dry brush over those raised sections, trying not to get it on the black as much as possible, but of course this can't be helped. Okay, so on to painting the green rods. Now it's pretty clear that I'm a fan of green rods because, well, I grew up with the 3rd edition codex. It was one thing which attracted me to the Necrons, were those green rods. So when they got rid of them, I was a little bit upset, to be honest. So what I did is I painted my new Gauss guns as if they had green rods in them. It's how I painted the guns on my Ghost Arcs, for example, to try to emulate that green rod look. Although it doesn't quite work, but it sort of does work. So I used the Mute green and I painted over those green rod sections, the raised sections, with this colour. Now it takes around 3 to 4 coats of painting this to get it nice and neat and to get it looking a consistent green. Just gradually build up the colour. Now you can see I'm using a magnifying glass in this tutorial. That's one reason why I have my camera to the side. I know it's not an ideal position, but it's the best I can do. Okay, so continuing with the Mute green, we're now moving on to the Tesla guns, and all of those recessed areas that we previously painted with Warpstone Glow, we're going to highlight with this colour. I'm effectively only going to paint this in the middle area of those recessed sections, so I'm going to leave the original colour on the outside and then this new colour on the middle, and that will just give us a nice looking green. And then again, just because I like the green rod look, I'm going to paint the 2 raised areas of the Tesla gun with Mute green. Again, it's quite a big area, so you're going to need at least 2 or 3 coats just to build up the colour and make it looking nice and bright. Okay, so next with the Mute green, we are going to paint the eyes. We're just going to dot the little raised section in the eyeball. We're going to turn the model upside down to do the opposite eye, because it becomes a lot easier if you've got the paintbrush in the same position. It's best to turn the miniature than to try to turn your brush. Okay, so now it's tidy up time. We're going to take our black paint And we're going to black in all of the areas that we want black because, of course, as I said, the dry brushing can be a bit messy. Plus, sometimes painting that green, you may accidentally paint some of the black sections as well. So just water the black paint down a little bit and then go over all of the black sections until you're happy. Okay, so next, just to add some depth to the guns, I'm going to highlight the guns very slightly. I'm going to use lead belcher and I'm just going to dry brush some of the areas on the guns. Now you have to be careful here. If you dry brush too much with this colour, the guns won't look black anymore, they'll look metal, and that's not what we want. So just a gentle little highlight here and there on the gun, just to represent some wear. Okay, so next I'm using Shining Gold, which is the original gold colour which was being sold by Games Workshop many years ago. However, they changed the range and it's now Gehenna's Gold, although that gold is quite red compared to the original. But whatever gold you use, basically just paint the symbol on the chest plate and then the rims around the neck. This will just add a little bit of colour and depth to the miniature. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the faces because Immortals have white faces. I'm going to use Skull White paint. I've watered it down a bit so that it doesn't get too gloppy, and then I'm going to paint over the face, and I'm going to do this about 6 or 7 times, just gradually build up the colour. Now the key thing here is to paint it once and let it dry before you put any more paint on. That's how you get a nice smooth finish. Just several coats, let it dry in between. Again, comparing to my old miniature, and it's looking really good. It's very close to being finished. However, we do need to tidy up the mouths because even though we were careful painting this skull white, of course, all of those teeth, it's going to be difficult to get it looking perfect. So we're going to wash the mouths with Nuln Oil. Just a simple little wash into the recesses of the teeth. Okay, so next, and again, this may seem like a really odd choice, but it's a choice I made when I started painting these miniatures without knowing really much about painting. I painted the edge of the blade, believe it or not, with Dawnstone Grey. Totally different to what maybe you think you would paint the edge of the blade with. However, I wanted a colour which represented something different on the edge of that blade to make it sort of feel like it was sharp. So I did paint it with this colour, and believe it or not, it sort of works. And I've kept this theme throughout the whole of my army. All of the edges of the blades of the warriors and immortals all have this Dawnstone on the edge of their blade. So that's the painting done. All we have to do now are the bases. So I just used some PVA glue and I glued on some sand. I then painted the sand black and I let it dry. I then dry brushed over the top of the sand with Dawnstone Grey. Of course, I also painted the sand on the top of the Tomb World bases as well, and again I dry brushed that grey. Once I'd done that, I did have to go back over with the mute green around the glowing orbs because obviously the sand sort of went over some of that glow. So just redid that on the 5 bases that I was going to have this glow effect. I then painted some little stones from my garden to represent rocks for the bases. My idea was to have a unit of 10 with 5 bases with no rocks on and 5 bases with rocks on, so that I can split them into 2 units of 5. These were really easy to paint. I just painted them black. I did the Caliban green and then I dry brushed over with the Warpstone glow and of course the mute green. I then just used super glue and glued them to the bases. And then finally all I had to do was paint the rims of the bases in black. And here they are. I'm really happy how these came out. They look exactly like my original Immortals, albeit probably slightly better painted because my dry brushing techniques have got better over time. They are pretty simple in their paint scheme, but it really works, especially for an infantry styled unit. As I said, if I'm going to add more units to the army, I will paint some of the wires in green to also represent another unit. So I'll have a unit with rocks on with silver wires, and then a unit of Roxxon with green wires. So that's something for the future. But for now, here they are. I really hope you enjoyed this. You can. I'm literally on the last section.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I'm literally saying the last bit.
Okay.
Let me just say this before you open the door.
Okay.
Yeah? I really hope you liked the video. Let me know what you think in the comments box below. And in the meantime, here are some more Necron painting tutorials for you to check out.